My friend Danny Fenster is an American journalist who's been detained in Myanmar by their military and has been held for over 100 days without due process. Please check out the hashtag #BringDannyHome or go to bringdannyhome.com for more information. Please consider signing the petition and sharing Danny's story.
Welcome to Galaxy Tenants Burning Man Chronicles Chapter 9. Today we head to Boulder, Colorado for a conversation with photographer and educator Andrew Wyatt, and we feature Hold Us Down and Nighttime by Giant Walking Robots.
So today I'm really excited to have this next guest on the Galaxy Tenants podcast. I've been seeing this gentleman wandering around the festival scene since I was a much younger version of myself. And I would see this gentleman wandering around in a Santa costume with a camera. And as I started going to Burning Man, I then started seeing his work following a bunch of the burns. I would like to welcome to the podcast today, Andrew Wyatt. How are you?
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. It's really great to meet you. Andrew recently started shooting for, some of you don't know, I have a online music publication called Music Marauders, and Andrew just started contributing to Music Marauders recently, which in and of itself is kind of a cool story. You had posted one of your Burning Man galleries, and I said to my wife, I would really love it if a guy like Andrew would shoot for us. And I don't know, maybe a week later you were reaching out about shooting Music Marauders, and that meant a lot to me. So welcome to the team, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to be a part of the team for sure. It's a great one.
What drew you to photography, and what do you love about capturing images?
Well, what originally drew me to photography was that I was living in Jackson Hole, Wyoming in the early 2000s, and I would just go on these just glorious hikes that were just mind-blowing. And I just decided to carry a camera with me to just shoot scenery. And then I realized I wanted to document people, like the people in images tell very interesting stories, and I wanted to be a part of that storytelling. And so I started going to things like the county fair and just bringing a camera to that, or the 4th of July parade and just bringing a camera to that. And then one day, a gentleman taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, would you like to shoot for our weekly newspaper? We need a photographer." So there you go.
What do you love about it? I don't want to gloss over that. What do you love about capturing images? Is it the stories, as you mentioned?
Yeah, but it also, it's funny. So obviously, and I want to backtrack a little bit, because the first time that I went to Burning Man was in 2001. And I took one photo, which was of the temple burn at the very end of the festival. And when I made a print of that image and I just felt how powerful that was, it made me realize that is, because I could feel that energy just from what I saw in the image, that's what I wanted to do more of.
I always find, obviously the experience of Burning Man itself is so stunning. In person, it's almost overwhelming at times, where there's so much stimuli going on that maybe you don't appreciate the individual moments or images that are flashing on the playa. And so to look back at Burning Man art, it really takes me to a singular moment, a singular piece of art or direction on the playa. And I really get to appreciate it on a different level than when I'm there.
Right. Well, and the other thing for me too is, one of the questions that I've often got is that as a photographer, do you feel like it separates you from what's happening? And for me, it was always the opposite. It always connected me to people. For example, when you're at Burning Man and you ask somebody, "Can I take your photo?" It draws you in to a person that you wouldn't normally speak to otherwise. And so I found myself, because I always had social anxiety at some level, that it was harder for me. I wasn't this outgoing person that could just walk up and talk to a stop sign or an art structure and have a conversation, And so, but then I was having conversations with people and getting to know more folks, not just at Burning Man, but also at music festivals that I was going to as well. So
there's a similarity in between those two groups, those two crowds, as far as the welcoming aspect, the hugs, the warm atmosphere that you would find, say, at like a string cheese show or a fish show relative to Burning Man. There's some crossover there. And maybe I'm biased because of what I do with Music Marauders, but I've always found photographers to be an extension of the experience, be it a music festival and they're there capturing it and taking pictures of people or the band, or be it at Burning Man where they're contributing to or capturing the art. I think that's a really interesting question that people would ask you that, because I see it the way you've kind of laid it out, how it would pull you into the experience more as opposed to just passing by that moment.
Yes, exactly. And that was definitely my experience for sure. And still is my experience.
In 2001, when you found Burning Man, how did that come to be?
So I have probably what has become one of the cliched ideas, in the sense that, you hear people talk about going to Burning Man and it changing their lives. Well, I was one of those people. But for me, I would say that it was far more significant than a typical person's story, in the sense that I was a Southern Baptist preacher when I first went to Burning Man. Yeah, I have a Master's of Divinity. I had done 3 years at a seminary and had started preaching in national parks. I was doing campground services.
This story just got a whole lot better. So how does a Southern Baptist preacher find Burning Man? How does that?
Yeah, you're like, I'm trying to connect the dots in my mind here, and I'm not sure I'm able to make it. Yeah. Well, and I couldn't either at the time. I mean, that's how mind-blowing it is. So at that time, I was on the fence. I'd been preaching for a few years, and my approach to the gospel was different than the typical Southern Baptist preacher. It wasn't... I saw Jesus as a figure that was open to different people and different societies, and was trying to reach people with compassion and trying to teach compassion. None of that was I experiencing in the Southern Baptist circles. I mean, people would leave my church services. I mean, I would start a sermon and halfway through, poof, they'd be gone.
What specifically would push them away is your openness to...
With the themes, yes, I mean, I would have Buddhist sayings sprinkled in my service. I would have Native American prayers, but also just some of the themes. I had one Easter sermon where I talked about how, for example, that in Jesus's time, there was no such thing as the concept of the soul. So that when people like him from 2,000 years ago in ancient Judea spoke of rebirth, they were not talking about a literal soul exiting your body and going to heaven, because that didn't get created till 90 years after his death. So when they talked about rebirth, it was always about renewing what was happening while we were living. Over a dozen times in the gospel, Jesus evokes the phrase, the kingdom of heaven on earth. What he was talking about was making things new while we're all still here. Because if we're not, it doesn't matter. And then people would just walk out of my, that was like not the Easter sermon that they wanted to hear.
I would say and who am I to say, maybe you were in the wrong specific faith, because Southern Baptist Church doesn't have a reputation for being the most open-minded organization per se.
That's correct, yes. And I found that out the hard way. I felt that I could do it, but yeah.
I think that's a very human thing, to think you can change people's minds or connect with people on some level. You want to be able to affect people in that positive way.
Right, right. And so then I became more discouraged, and I had a friend of mine. It was in August, and I had a friend of mine who says, "Hey," and this was back in the day where you could still drive up to the gate and buy a ticket. This was beginning of August, and I had a friend of mine who says, "Let's go to Burning Man. If you go with me to the desert, and you come out a week later, and you still are led to preach, then you're on your own, kid." But if not, then perhaps there is another path for you. And so I thought to myself, maybe I should. And it completely blew my head off.
Was it a complicated decision for you to make? Did you think that by making that decision, you were potentially stepping outside of the realm of what your church or profession or direction may want? So you're kind of stepping outside of that box.
Oh yeah, I was
just by attending.
Not to put it in a ironic way, but I was nervous as hell, So and my parents were so upset with the idea of me going to Burning Man, because I was going to be going with the heathens and the crazy hippies, and
they weren't wrong.
No, that's true. Yeah, of course. But at the time, it was just all a big blank unknown to me. I knew that that's what I had heard, the same way that my parents had heard. So I was very nervous about whether I was going to completely lose myself. And it was a little scary. But at the same time, it did make me wonder, what am I missing about this universe that I'm not yet seeing? And could going to Burning Man be this little portal that could open up that window for me?
And how was it? 20 years later.
The first night I was there, there are so many remarkable things about my first experience there that I feel very blessed and lucky about. For one, my first night on the playa, my friend and I run halfway across the desert to jump on a pirate ship art car. And when we do, we were invited on right away. And then within 2 hours of us traveling with these people on this art car, the leader of the camp had a Sharpie in the back of his pocket, pulled that Sharpie out, and wrote down the address of where that pirate ship camped at, and said, "Tomorrow, if you can find your car where it's parked, move that car to this address." And they became my instant family. I have camped with, they're called Camp Gallivant. Their ship is called the USS Nevada. And I've been with them every year since.
I actually, whenever I talk about Burning Man, I often mention the SS Nevada. I've taken pictures of it as it's sailed by my camp. And so that's interesting to hear that you are camped with them. That's what a cool contribution they bring to the playa. Very, very cool art car.
Yeah, and they have they have a rum bar that they call the R Bar. They're just very welcome. It's a very welcoming opening camp. They're, salt of the earth people that live in and around the Reno area. And so that was one thing that was remarkable, just how I immediately witnessed how welcoming a group of strangers could be towards somebody like myself. So the other part was that my mind was immediately blown because I had my first LSD experience on the deck of that pirate ship, my first night on the playa. And I can recall vividly We were in the middle of a sandstorm. It was at dusk, so there was this purple light, and I literally, time slowed down, and I could see just grains of sand swirling in slow motion around me. And instantly, I realized my picture of the universe was a whole lot smaller than it actually was. Like all of a sudden, that portal opened up.
What a perfect experience. Perfect moment in time.
It was unbelievable. And then I leaned over. I was standing on the bow of the ship at the front, and I leaned over, and all of a sudden I saw these two golf cart-sized art cars that were dolphins, and they were L-wire lit up in motion. So there was one pink dolphin and one aquamarine dolphin, and they were diving in and out of this ocean of the sand, like swimming along the bow of the ship. And I just completely just melted. My mind melted.
If that's night one, where do you go from there? Like, how does how does the rest of that week or weekend look, Because the cool thing is, if that happened at the end of your experience, you might not still have that whole week to grow. Say on the last night, if you had that LSD experience, but for you to have taken that towards the beginning of your trip, your experience at the burn, it leaves that the rest of those days open for you to explore and feel that freedom, if you will.
Right. Well, that was the thing, so the next morning I wake up, we did find our car, we packed it all up, we moved to the address of where this camp was. And immediately you're just surrounded by hugs and like people saying, welcome home. And like, hey, have you had any breakfast yet? We just cooked up, this, that, the other, like, oh, by the way, have you had any rum yet? It was just kind of like all of a sudden you're just like enveloped into this family. And then it's the unbelievable art that suddenly, like you said, having that experience my first night, then I was just open to accepting what was out on the playa. The art, the costumes, the people, the unexplained experiences. I was open to them in a way that I might not have been open to otherwise.
When you left Black Rock City, when you left the desert that week, did you know that you were coming back? And what was your takeaway just from the original experience you had? And did you go back to preaching at all?
Well, occasionally people say to me, like, well, that was a sermon, but they're much different than they used to be, for sure. Yeah, it was so funny. That first year, I had one costume, and it was a Jesus costume, because I wanted to represent my beliefs and, my profession, which is why I got my playa name is Jesus, which is now ironic because now on the music festival circuit, I'm known for the sequin Santa suit. So that's pretty interesting. But the thing was, I remember very vividly, it was like a insanely slow exodus. It was like 8 to 10 hours just getting to the road. And this was back when there were still only 20,000 people, mind you. Back in 2001, it wasn't the 80,000 person festival that it is now. It was much smaller, but it was still just a slow crawl. And I remember feeling, on one hand, this incredible elation because, wow, I feel like the scales had fallen from my eyes and I could see the world, like, almost with bright new colors and a broader perspective of reality that I didn't have before. And all of that was just so thrilling. But at the same time, the other part of my head was saying, what in the fuck am I going to do now? I am so screwed because I literally can't go back to preaching anymore. Like, it was done.
That's the thing about the immediate perspective shift, is it leaves you in an awkward predicament. Oftentimes, your whole reality is shifted, but you still have to go back to the old one.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's just kind of like, well, how am I going to make a living? What is going to be my profession? And you have to remember, I didn't go to Burning Man to take photos. I was not a photographer. I took one photo that whole festival. So I had no idea what I was going to do, how I was going to do it. And I was living in Jackson Hole, which is an insanely expensive place to live, even back then. And I thought, oh my gosh, well, I could work in a restaurant just to start paying some bills and then figure, out how I can move or I got a retail job was what I did. I was at a cash register in a tourist shop. But then what was interesting was I still had this feeling that I wanted to serve people around me. Whatever that calling was that led me to preach, it was still there. And I landed in a career in educating children with mental and physical disabilities, which I still do today. There have been a couple of periods in my life. I was a newspaper photographer for a couple of years, but my profession is not photography. It is being an educator for people with disabilities.
I think that's wonderful. I think that says a lot about who you are, and it's a great transition in service as a part of your story. I think it's really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me about the work you do.
So I work at Boulder High School in Boulder, Colorado, in their what they call Intensive Learning Center classroom, which is the classroom for children with disabilities. It is probably the most challenging work. I mean, if I had made a living as a photographer, my life would be so much easier, really. But that's not the path that either I chose or that was chosen for me, or both. But one of the things that is really remarkable, and I'll just reference one of the students that I work with. So we had a student 4 years ago who came into the school as a freshman who's autistic, nonverbal, and would lose control of his emotions at times, and he's a big guy too, like a linebacker sized guy, and would flail his arms and, get physically dangerous, not maliciously, but just because of being overwhelmed, being autistic by his environment. And that child instantly was drawn to me. And whenever he was in trouble, no matter who he was with, whether it was a lead teacher, whether it was an assistant teacher, which is my role, somebody would run up the stairs if I was in another classroom and say, hey, he needs some help, come on down. And instantly, because I was there, he was able to calm down. But not even that, though, but the times where because I was next to him, that he was able to learn, to be able to recognize his ABCs, to be able to recognize numbers 1 to 25 that he clearly had not been able to do before, learning how to spell his name, things like that you can't even put a price tag on, that kind of experience that you have in your profession.
The world needs more people like you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The thing that has really been interesting to me is that my profession dovetailed almost perfectly with what I felt when I experienced Burning Man. I think in a lot of people's minds, we compartmentalize things enough that we don't realize how I could feel exactly the same way I feel with that one-on-one child who has autism when I experience someone's art piece, like David Best's elaborate temples, for example. When I see one of his structures in flames the last day, like a 40-foot flame, which was a really tall one that one year. And when I experience the people there and the atmosphere there, I feel like, and that's why I always wanted to go back. The first year I went to Burning Man, I thought to myself, I'll just get it out of my system, because that's what I thought it was like. I was that naive. I had that little of an idea of what Burning Man was.
Yeah, you thought you could check it off the list.
Yeah, that was the bucket list. I went, I can get back to reality, that sort of thing. And what I realized is that it was a spiritual home for me. That's the thing about it, is that though I lost my religion, I didn't lose my spirit. And my spirit was always present in the Black Rock Desert on the playa with all the people that I was with.
And you came out with a different version of yourself that served in a different way. I think that's really beautiful.
And the other part too that I realized too is that, because I've been going back through some of my older photos, I grew up through Burning Man. I mean, some people have that story about how their parents brought them when they were 5 or 6 and they literally did grow up. But I was in my 20s. I am now 53. I've gone to Burning Man every year that they've had it since 2001, except for one. And it's only through the people that I've met and the experiences that I've had that I literally grew up. My self-awareness increased. My awareness of the world around me increased because of Burning Man. I got married, legally married at Burning Man in 2015. I mean, literally, people that I've been camping with since 2001, that's what they say to me. They say, we have watched you grow up here.
I think when people experience any sort of formative experience and go through anything that's that formative at any age, that's when you grow up. It's when things change. That's when you see the most growth. And Burning Man has also provided me with some of that, though I started going in 2011, I think. But throughout that time between then and now, very formative years. So I can relate to that feeling of growth through Burning Man.
I feel like it's really interesting to me, too. We were watching, somebody had made a video. We were married at this art structure called the Totem of Confessions in 2015.
I'm familiar with it. Beautiful, beautiful temple-looking structure.
Yeah, like it's a 3-tier structure made with panels of black and white lithograph photos. And the artist, Mike Garlington, was there when we started to have the ceremony, and he kicked everybody out of the temple so we could have our ceremony in front of the building. And afterward, someone had just posted a video of people had made a tunnel with their arms that we had to go underneath. And it was just like one of these pans that kept going and going. And we're like, we forgot like how many people, how long that line was. And the funny thing about it is that at our wedding, there was not one member of either mine or my wife's immediate family at our wedding, but there were still over 100 people.
Right. You still had, quote, ceremony. Family there. You know?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I feel like that's pretty telling.
If I'm not mistaken, that was the structure that Susan Sarandon brought Timothy Leary's ashes to, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, exactly. The night that it burned. So it burned on Thursday night. And that was so, I mean, boy, the levels of psychic experience that you have. Like, I got married at this art structure. Susan Sarandon brought Timothy Leary's ashes Thursday afternoon into that structure when it was burned that night. And we're sitting in front of the very art structure that we got married in front of and watched it go up in flames.
That is fucking rowdy, if I'm being candid.
Yeah. I mean, Red and I are just kind of just sitting watching this going, whoa.
That's intense, man. What are your favorite camps and art cars?
Oh, geez. Okay. I've got a few. I mean, obviously, Camp Gallivant with the pirate ship art car. It's not the largest pirate ship on the playa, but it's actually one of these longest running art cars of Burning Man to this day, because they brought it out for the first time in 2002, which was the Floating World. That was their first year bringing it out. And I recommend their art car for one, because I appreciate the art cars and the camps that are welcoming and opening, you know. And if they're parked on the playa and you want to get on the USS Nevada, they're not going to like block you or say, no, you can't get on our art car. This is ours. They invite people on, and they invite people into their camp, you know. So, and they're usually around the 230 arm of the playa. Mm-hmm. So I recommend them. I also recommend a center camp theme camp called Camp Homebrew, and for the same reason. They brew their own beers and bring them out to the playa and serve them, and they're always around the artery area in center camp. And Dan Bailey is one of the leaders of that camp, and just remarkable people, you know, people that just show you how to be human.
I feel like Burning Man has lost a little bit of that over the years. There are some art cars where you have to have a bracelet from the camp to get on, or whatever the case is. You know, you look at the plug-in plays, or a lot of the camps where it's like, if I wanted to walk into that camp, I wouldn't even know how to get into that space, because all the trailers and motorhomes are parked in such a way where they don't want people coming in. So I love to hear about the camps and cars that are warm and welcoming.
Another one is Camp Northwest Mist. They're a theme camp and they're usually on the Esplanade on the 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock side of the playa. And they provide a service in that if you go in their tent, they have a big, huge circus tent, and you go in and they will mist you with cool water. You know, I mean, so they're a good service camp, but also, and their people are the same way. Please come in. They are actually a really cool camp in the sense that they have a huge kitchen and one night every year at Burning Man, they serve a meal to all the artists and organizers of Burning Man. And that's a really, really sweet gesture that they perform.
That's great. What are your favorite images that you've captured from the burn?
Well, one of them is actually right over my shoulder, which is a picture of an art sculpture that was constructed by Laura Kempton and Jeff Schomburg. And they've brought this one out a few times to the playa. What's cool about it is that it's my version of a selfie. I'm actually in that photo. I'm one of the streaks of light, and then my wife is one of the other streaks of light. We were wearing LED vests, and what's funny about this photo is that I did not bring, there's one piece that goes on a tripod that I didn't bring to fit to my camera, so I couldn't use my tripod. And so I just set it on the ground with my on top of my backpack. And I was like, well, here we go. Let's see if this works. So
it's beautiful.
Yeah, I have another favorite, which is this gentleman who would always paint himself red and has a red cloak on. And every year at Burning Man would serve tea on the playa. And so it was just like this kind of ritual, kind of connection kind of thing that he does. Here, I think, let's see if I can put this in front of the camera so you can see it.
Hold it up a little bit. Wow, that is very interesting imagery.
Yeah, I was on the USS Nevada and we were cruising across the playa, and all of a sudden out of the corner of my eye, because it was probably about 10 or 15 yards away from where the art car was, I was like, oh my. And then, oh Greta, can you get that one? Yeah,
I love that you have them handy to physically show me. This is amazing. I did not expect this.
Yeah, these were a part of an art show that I was in a few years back when they used to have art shows. This one was a really awesome photo in the sense that I was on the USS Nevada. We were cruising across. They're trying to get their placement for the man burn, and this dust storm starts to kick up. Again, it was one of those where I was just out of the corner of my eye, and that was even further away. That was probably a good, 30 yards away from where we were. And this couple was kissing on top of the warthog, and it was called Lord Snort, which is an art piece made by Brian Tedrick. And just this, it looked just a scene, like with the dust starting to kick up, it looked like it was right out of a scene from Star Wars. It's literally how it hit me. And seconds after I took that photo, dust had completely enveloped that art piece, and we had already moved on. I mean, it was just like that.
That moment probably took a lot to come together, leading up to it. That's very cool. I love the dust and the euphoric environment that it creates. A lot of people don't dig it, but it's actually one of my favorite parts visually of the experience. What does dust do to a camera like yours?
Mess it up.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah, and the thing is I'm a little bit limited in using underwater housing or plastic bag style coverings to protect it, because I have cerebral palsy in my trigger finger, or my right hand, basically. So any kind of coverings or anything that makes shooting more awkward limits me. As a matter of fact, when I shoot, I actually hold the camera so it rests on the thumb of my left hand, and I use my left pointer finger as the trigger. So it comes back dust. I can't cover it with stuff. And, but you get it cleaned, get the sensor clean, and get their housing clean. But after that, it's ready to go again. So
good to hear. I always wondered about that, if people had like a Playa-specific camera, or if it was cleanable, because I've seen motorhomes come out of that place that are not cleanable. So I figured that might be the same with a camera.
If for people that have the options, there you will see people with underwater housing over their camera, or the plastic bags that you use for diving that cover it, So there are definitely things that people use. But for me, it is just like, I'm going out there, it's going to get dirty, I'm going to come back and clean it.
kind of just accept that going into it.
Yeah.
Have you ever shown your work out there?
Yes. There was a few years ago, it might have been 2013, I can't remember, but there was an art gallery show in Center Camp. The way they arranged it was different regions from around the country were responsible for different sections of the gallery. And I was a part of the Colorado group, and I contributed work to be a part of that. And then, can you get the Temple one, the Galaxia? And then in 2019, there was another gallery on the Playa, and they asked me to contribute.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It just disappears. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was also during a dust storm. I mean, so obviously, as you can tell, that's a favorite time for me to shoot photos. I love shooting when the dust storm kicks up because you get stuff like that.
Some of the best stuff comes out of taking probably risks in that setting.
Right. And then I had one other showing out there in the Reno airport. They made these huge, like 10-foot long prints of art cars. And I was asked to contribute an art car photo of the teacups.
Oh, that's such a great art car.
Yeah, that's, again, talk about one of my favorites. That's definitely one.
Was that called the Mad Tea Party?
Yes.
I really like that one. What's your takeaway from going on 20 years, having experienced your first Burning Man, having experienced Black Rock City for the first time? When you reflect on all of those years of attending and all of the variety of experiences you've had, what's your takeaway as a whole?
Well, I think the major takeaway for me is no matter how many years you go, there is always something new to experience. I'll give you an example, referencing another favorite camp of mine. There's a camp called Camp P3, which is put together by a Colorado couple, Princess Stephanie and his wife Kiji. And they throw one of the most amazing people parades every year called the Wedding Parade. And so they take donations through the year of wedding dresses and bring hundreds of them to their camp. And on Wednesday, it's the same day and Wednesday afternoon every year, they invite people to dress up in wedding dresses and parade through the city. You know, that is something that I had not experienced. I mean, he's been doing that for probably at least 10 years, I think. And I had experienced it for the first time ever in 2018. You know, I mean, so.
That speaks to the magnitude and the scale of the fucking city. You have a bunch of people wandering around in wedding dresses. I have not seen this. You hadn't seen it until recently. And there are people just wandering around. I mean, you'd think in any other city, that would be very noticeable.
Right, exactly. Don't you think? Yeah, like that a parade of 300 people in wedding dresses would just blend in.
That's so funny. I hope to see you out there. I hope to spend some time with you out there and explore the city and get to know you. I mean, we can do that around here too, but I think it'd be a lot of fun to catch up with you out there.
Oh, I would love it. I mean, we do hope, if they do bring it back next year, we fully expect ourselves to be there. I mean, it just means too much. It has become embroidered in my heart. Literally, there's a room in my heart that's got Burning Man's name written on it.
Bet you never thought you'd say that.
Not when I was a preacher.
Work at the airport.
Thank you for listening to Galaxy Tenants. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, like, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. For early access to episodes and exclusive content, check us out on Patreon. Also, if you'd like to communicate with us, send an email to galaxytenants@gmail.com or leave a voicemail on the Galaxy Tenants hotline at 303-550-2065.